Hello again, and welcome to e-commerce growth show. It's my pleasure and honor to have here Sean Sheppard. Hello, Sean.
Hi, Val. How are you?
I'm fine. I was just saying that I'm admiring your garden, and I'm really glad to have you here with us. Let me give a brief introduction about you to our audience. So, Sean is a serial entrepreneur, VC, and co-founder of GrowthX and GrowthX Academy with three successful exits, who has grown successfully dozens of early stage companies across a wide variety of products and markets. Sean, thanks a lot for being part of e-commerce growth show.
Thank you, Val. I'm happy to be here as always. I always enjoy talking with you.
Great. So let's start directly by asking you how you decided, if you can recall that moment, that you must go into entrepreneurship.
I don't know if I chose it as much as it chose me. As far as I can remember, I've always hustled for opportunities to make a living and help people and do things that are interesting, and I've been all the way back to being a small child and doing landscaping or selling lemonade on a corner, any number of different things. But I think entrepreneurship is something that calls you. You don't call it.
Can you please tell us regarding if you are looking back, it was a good decision, it was a great decision, or it was a bad decision to hear that calling and to pursue that calling?
I've tried. I think it was a great decision. It's never easy, but I've tried having a job and I didn't like it. Working for one person is, to me, very different than working for an entire customer base. People always look at entrepreneurs and they think that we're the boss. Be your own boss. No, you're not the boss. As an entrepreneur, you are subservient to your customers. You have many more bosses than your employees do. And people don't necessarily realize that. If you have 3,000 customers, you have 3,000 bosses, and you should treat it that way.
Yeah. Okay, so focusing a bit on our audience, here we have e-commerce managers and e-commerce owners. Raluca is appreciating the birds chirping.
I can see that.
Yeah, so let's focus a bit on the e-commerce business model. Do you believe this business model is a good one? Because there are some voices that tell that the market is saturated, you can't do pretty much anything about it, and Amazon has eaten up the market. And yeah, what's your take on this?
Well, I think that Amazon still has less than 10% of the market. And I think that everyone who wants to use e-commerce as a way to conduct business and help people has an opportunity. How large is that opportunity? That depends. I don't know if you necessarily have to compare yourself to Amazon. Learn from what Amazon has done well and use it to your own advantage. But you need to have something that's very unique. I think I tweeted this the other day, Val. There are really kind of a couple of things I think everyone needs to have if they want to separate themselves. You need to have a unique point of view. What's your why? Why are you doing what you're doing? And be able to share that story with the world. And then you have to have some sort of unique differentiator. What makes you different than everyone else that's doing what you're doing? And then how do you express that through your energy and focus to the world? And I think those are the three things. Have a point of view that talks about your why, show how you're different, and then express your difference and your uniqueness through your energy and your focus. And so how does that manifest itself? I think it means that you can select one very small niche in a global marketplace and do your best to become the best at it. Master that one thing. Everybody wants to talk to subject matter experts. Everybody wants somebody to help them with something, right? You, for example, with e-commerce as a business, that is a niche in the world. You've shown how you're different. You've shared your why, and you show it through your focus and energy in doing things like this e-commerce growth show. And I think that's where that contributes significantly to your success as an entrepreneur. And I think everyone has that same opportunity. But we spend too much time thinking about what other people are doing or reading what else is happening in the world. And oftentimes it takes us off of that focus.
Yeah. When we are looking at some, let's say, mistakes or errors, or the most let's say frustrating things that you see entrepreneurs keep on doing, which are the top of mind for you?
I think the biggest things, I kind of break down business into you've got your people, you've got your product, you've got your knowledge, and then your behaviors, and then you've got your customers, right? Your market. I think many entrepreneurs are focused too much on their own product and not the problems that exist in their market and how to solve those. I think that's a big one. I think the other one is the kind of people they surround themselves with that may not have the right kinds of behaviors to be successful in startups. Startups are very different than established businesses. I like to say that being a startup is being a stranger with a strange offering in a strange place, asking other strangers to do strange things with them.
I love that.
And if you think about that, how you would approach attracting other strangers and being successful in that strange environment is very different than what you do when you are a familiar face talking to other familiar people with a familiar offering, asking them to do something with which they're quite familiar. And then I think the second thing, so that's about stage relevance, right? That's about having somebody who can, so what's the question? The question is what makes someone good at working in a startup? They know how to embrace ambiguity. They're not afraid. They never say that's not my job. They know how to wear many hats. They can communicate very well across everybody on the team as well as in the market. They're amazing learners, and they drive the learning process. They have a real passion for the product or technology that they're offering, but they don't necessarily have to be a product person or a technologist. You know, I'm a tech entrepreneur, but I like to make the joke that I can't even spell HTML. But I know what technology can do to help people get what they want, and I'm very good at translating that. And ultimately, that's what it comes down to. How can you identify a problem that someone has and solve that problem for them in a meaningful and valuable way? And if you do it very well for a few people first, you'll find that many other people have the same problem, and you'll be able to build a sustainable business around it.
Yeah. Sean, it's from what I'm hearing, it's clear that we're on the same page. However, when we are doing these strange things to strange people, and when we are asking them to do these strange things, it's what I noticed on myself. This is my fourth company already, and I'm always doing the same mistake. I'm always so enthusiastic at the beginning and think that, yeah, I'm doing A and then B and then C. But what I've identified is that the ifs that I have in my head are not there in the market. So there are a lot of ifs. If this happened, and then if that happened, and then if the other happens, then I'm going to do a great exit and I'm going to help the world. In the battlefield, when I'm going as a stranger there, people are looking at me very awkward, and I think the enthusiasm is quickly replaced by the need to be resilient and to find the right angle and the right problem. And I think that's a hard thing to do. How do you find resilience, and how?
Um,
What's your
yeah,
advice?
some of us, I guess some of us have it in their DNA, and others can learn it. I think like any skill, I think resilience or grit and determination are an amazing set of attributes. In fact, there's a wonderful book by Angela Duckworth called Grit that characterizes grit as probably the one most common and key attribute in success in the world, and it talks about being that way. I think having a persistently positive outlook on life is one key element of that resilience. I think another key attribute of that resilience is never doubting yourself. And I think that that's probably one of the things that holds us back more than anything else in life is self-doubt. And self-doubt can creep in from one of the most dangerous things that any human has, and that's the ability to talk down to themselves. Negative self-talk is more destructive and damaging to any individual's opportunity for success than anything anyone else would do. Ask yourself the question, when you're down on yourself and you speak negatively to yourself, would you ever say some of the things that you say to yourself to another person? We say some nasty things to ourselves. Yeah. And usually what we find out over time, if we're willing to learn, is that things were never as bad as we thought they were. And that we have gotten through everything so far in life. We're here, right? So the worst of times have always, each and every one of us have gotten through them. So belief in yourself, belief that you are resilient and have that grit and determination, maintaining that positive attitude, and then while you have that vision, Val, for what you want the world to be when you start a company, you know, if I do this, I get this, and then I get that, and then I get that. You need to be willing to learn along the way. You most likely will end up in a very different place than you ever started. All I ever wanted to do for a living was play golf professionally. I tried it, and then I got burnt out on it, and then I changed, and I went to do something else. And I continue to do different things. I have a whole wide variety of interests and things that keep me going. And I think the one thing that I've learned from all of it is that if you can keep going and you keep learning, and you continue to improve, that you'll eventually find, you know, your fit with your product or service or offering, or place, you know, in the market. And the first time is always the most difficult because you're a stranger. You're an unproven entity or commodity to the world. But once you've done it successfully, the world starts to look at you differently. And they start to see you much less as a stranger and more as a leader and more as someone that they want to be around. And then it gets interesting because you go from, I did this thing and it was really hard, and I was able to succeed, even though maybe I didn't realize it at the time, or I still don't realize it, that I was successful. Then you start to see people come out of the woodwork, so to speak, and want to be a part of you and what you're doing or your next thing, right? Everybody wants to be associated with a winner. Not everyone's there while you're losing. You know, it's the people that stuck it out with you along the journey are the ones that you need to keep close to you, because sooner or later people will start to come at you and either want to take things from you or be a part of what you're doing or help you. And you have to watch out for the takers. They're very manipulative, and they can create challenges for you. And so my journey was really hard, doing things what I seemingly thought was very much on my own. But I did have people around me that helped me along that journey and that process. And I didn't fully appreciate it at the time. And then other people started to come at me, wanting to be a part of it. Very impressive people, and who make you feel very good. And then you find out who has good intentions and who doesn't. And then after that, it becomes, for me, today, at this point in my life, at 47 years of age, and been doing this stuff for probably more than 30 years, it's all about the people I choose to work with, the people I choose to help, the people who choose to help me. And I'm very much focused on finding people and sticking with people that understand me, and want to give and contribute, as opposed to just take from that.
Just take, yeah. Sean, there's a nuance here, and I want to add something into the conversation. Throughout the life, you have moments when you are putting yourself in doubt, right? So you have those moments. What I've seen on this in the valley of despair, let's say, I've noticed that on this valley, if you are looking at yourself and considering that your value is equal to your results, then you are screwed. But if you can dissociate yourself from the results that you've had in the past, and if you realize that you are living today in the present, then you can get all the know-how that you've learned throughout all these bad experiments that taught you what you know right now. And then there's a huge, let's say, amount of knowledge and energy that you can use. But once you are identified with the results, you have a bad image about a skewed image about yourself, because you're not your results. There are a lot of factors that contributed to your success which weren't in your control from the very beginning. So sometimes you're just at the right place with the right people, and you made it happen. But that doesn't mean that someone else wouldn't have done it if it was there instead of you. So I think that the nuance here is you're not your results. For me, it was such an eye opener, and it was a huge relief that made me actually go further.
You're 100% correct. I talk about that all the time with startups, and one of the behaviors that creates failure is the bias we have against information and towards affirmation. And we go out to experiment or run a test or construct a hypothesis, and intellectually in our minds, we're saying, okay, I have this hypothesis, I want to test it. So you go out, you seek feedback, and you say, I'm all about feedback. Feedback is a gift, etc. But then it hits you. You don't get the results you were expecting. I have this formula called F equals E minus R. Frustration equals expectations minus results.
Yeah.
And it's incredible what that does to drive people's behavior. And so we tend to, even once we intellectually know the right way of going about this process, our natural reaction when we don't hear or get what we want is to fall back into that position of becoming the results, personally identifying, or letting the reaction affect us individually. And so as a result, we tend to skirt the issue and not really truly seek the truth about what people really perceive about our products, because we think it's perceiving us as people. And that confirmation bias and founder bias, we call it, is very dangerous. And so we have to be willing, as I said before about what are the attributes that are great in working in a startup, we have to be willing to be open to the most objective truth possible and be open learners while we're doing it. But when a negative emotion comes in, our brain will stop processing information and it will start protecting us. In fact, there's some interesting research that suggests that when we are most open to learning is when we are laughing, because the fear is gone. And so our brains open up and we accept more information and we absorb it, and we process it and use it to our advantage. So when you're happy, you're learning more. And so keeping yourself in that state of mind is important. So to your point, separating the person from the process of learning is very, very important, especially if you come into a thing with a set of expectations, Val, like you said. If I do this and this and this, then I can get to my vision. But don't forget your current reality. The best early customers to work with are people who agree with your vision, but also appreciate your current reality and are willing to give you the time and truth you need to go on that journey together so that you can achieve a vision that should be mutually beneficial to everyone.
Yeah, that is, however, it's a constant dance that you have to acknowledge, and it's coming based on these bad experiments. We here in Eastern Europe, we have this, let's say, not bias, but this disadvantage that we're looking first at the bad side of things. What could go wrong? What if this happened? What if that happened? And we, even though that's good for being an accountant or a risk analyst, that's not quite good for an entrepreneur, because if you always look at the what could go wrong, and if you overanalyze it, you're not going to start doing anything, because there are too many risks.
That's right. You prepare for the worst, but don't just hope for the best. Hope is not a strategy. Execute for the best outcome, right? Spend your time on it. I understand the cultural phenomenon. In other parts of the world, they are it is culturally unacceptable to admit that you don't know something or admit that you've made a mistake.
Yeah.
And both of those things are very dangerous when you're trying to learn. Entrepreneurs, the most important thing is what you don't know matters more than what you do as an entrepreneur. And so you should constantly be pursuing the things that you don't know.
Yeah. In terms of the current environment for e-commerce, we have two types of e-commerce right now. Let's split them into e-commerce companies which are making it happen because there's a high demand on what they are selling. Either these are essentials or new essentials or whatever. And on the other end, we have companies which are not making it happen. Let's say they are strictly related to travel or whatever, and the demand for them is gone. What are some tips for them to get to the new normal?
You've got to be open to pivoting in real time. We see it in manufacturing, and I know that this is a specific use case, but we've all heard the stories about manufacturers starting to make ventilators and hand sanitizer, not just because they were forced by the government, but because there was a clear opportunity to do it. And they had the skill set to make something different and make that thing happen. In e-commerce, you can do the same thing. Especially if you're doing, say, consumer products, right? And the consumer products are not products that you manufacture, but they're products that you sell and distribute. You know how to set up a supply chain in minutes to pivot what you offer and sell. So any good e-commerce manager can do that. So why not pivot to the things that are most resilient right now? Or at least not pivot entirely, but at least open up new channels and new offerings. But in order to do that, you've got to be willing to take that quote unquote risk. But frankly, what I've always loved about e-commerce, especially in an established supply chain where you're, say, reselling existing products and services, is it's very low risk to go out and test in the market what you can offer and what kind of margins you can garner from that. There's an incredible amount of freedom and flexibility in e-commerce testing, in my view. And so I would be really very much focused on what are people's priorities today, and try and address those today priorities. And don't just guess on these things, but you have existing relationships that you can leverage to learn from, and go speak to those people and create a conversation that says we're all scared and we're all freaking out and we're all feeling this way. Yeah. What can we be doing together right now where I can be helpful? You already know me. You already like me. I'm familiar. I'm a familiar face from a familiar place that you can trust. What else can I be doing for you? What else do you think I could be doing for the world? Everyone has thoughts and opinions about that. I think that's where it starts. It always comes back to a human-to-human experience. And I know we're in the e-commerce business, but there are many ways to engage with those people in a very live, active way right now to learn what you can be doing.
Yeah, it's great that you've mentioned that. And Shona, what I've been noticing is that the payback for building a relationship which is authentic with your customers is right now. Because if you've, as an e-commerce company, if you've just moved boxes from A to B, and you haven't considered what happened with the customer after they've received the box, and you haven't cared about how they feel about your products, then they are not going to care about you when you're gonna send them an email that now you're, I don't know, you want to do something else, or you want to sell them again something. And unfortunately, it was this hype of traffic acquisition or of acquiring customers, but unfortunately, most of the e-commerce companies which are starting out are not aware about the importance of customer retention. So that means they are acquiring customers and they don't care about the total lifespan. And that's really, let's say, it's a clumsy strategy to rely on a demand that is going to be there forever instead of building an authentic relationship with your customers.
It's no different than taking your spouse or partner for granted, and then one day they get up and they walk out.
Yeah.
It's always easier, faster, and cheaper to keep a customer than it is to get a new one. So in the overall customer life cycle, if you don't already specialize between attraction, acquisition, and then retention and growth, you need to start thinking about it that way. If you don't have the resources to break up the team into those things, into those key areas, how do I attract people? How do I convert them? And then how do I keep them? Then you need to separate your time and thinking in order to make sure that that's something that you can do on the daily, right? On a regular basis and a frequent basis. So that's that. I completely agree. I think the other thing is that in the e-commerce business, we tend to be very transactional in our thinking, right? I mean, look at the work you do. You think about, how do I move somebody from one step in a funnel to another? How do I get more of them? How do I improve and increase those conversion rates as I go through my customer life cycle? There's very much transactional, that is very much a transactional mindset, and it needs to be, and that makes sense. You've got to look at the data, but then what happens once you get inside that data? Then where do the insights go? And then when you get deeper, ultimately, at some point, you're going to create a set of questions that need to be validated by actually talking to humans again. And that's where the transaction becomes the relationship. And so now more than ever, building and establishing and maintaining those relationships is super critical. And if you haven't been authentic about it, people will leave you.
Yeah, that's true. I've been seeing this happening, and actually we got someone in the show, a former customer of ours. He grew his company to 11 countries. They've got this incredible growth year over year, 4 years in a row, more than 80% year over year growth in revenue. And when I met him, we started to cooperate in the conversion rate optimization, and they haven't been noticing the fact that their NPS was crappy because they haven't monitored it. Their customer retention was bad as well because they haven't been able to track customer retention, and they were guiding themselves solely on the P&L. And the surprise for them was that even the P&L haven't shown something about the future, because it was all this linear projection. You haven't seen the factors that generate growth, which are customers coming back. But at some point, they've reached the ceiling, and they couldn't attract new customers to them. So they've collapsed because of that. And
yeah, because that becomes somewhat of a vanity metric. When your market is large enough for you to be able to grow without paying attention to churn, that eventually is going to run out. And I guarantee you, Amazon looks at churn every day, because every time you lose a customer, you have to replace it with 2 in order to just maintain your growth rate. Think about that. Exactly. You have to work twice as hard every time you lose a customer just to get back to where you were and to try to continue to grow. And that's serious math. And so paying very close attention to churn, what happens and why it happens, engaging those people, and just asking them to tell you the truth makes a big difference. Now, you've got to be careful about how you do that. It's like I always say, you're only asking for 2 things when you're trying to grow a business from your customers, and they're not revenue. It's time and truth. It's give me the time and then tell me the truth. And then demonstrate that you're willing to accept that truth and do something about it, and not go back into your into assuming that reaction as a personal affront to you as a person, and view that feedback as a gift and take it and then show them. I think the best customer service professionals in the world are people that will tell you they don't know something, but they'll find out for you. I'm serious. I mean, think about the experiences you've had in your life. And that's where you need to be. Even if you don't have the answer, it's okay. People don't expect you always to have the answer. I think en masse we think that, which is why our politicians behave the way they behave, because they have to always pretend like they know. They have all the answers about COVID. No, they don't. Obviously, right? Because we've never faced this before. But people will expect them, the media will expect them to have the answers. And then the minute the truth changes and the facts change and they change their mind, they are criticized for it. Yeah. And that's not productive behavior. That doesn't help anyone. I wish everyone would just say, I don't know what I don't know yet, but I have a way of trying to find out. And so you need to build a framework for your business that asks the right questions based on the activities that you're tracking and measuring, so that you can learn quickly.
We have a question, Sean, from Alexandra. She's asking, what do you suggest in order to engage the customers?
Well, I think once again, you have to start with a hypothesis about what you want to, what are you hoping to learn? And then you need to build a narrative that says, I'd like to speak to you about this for this reason. You have to give people a reason. Give them a why, right? Hopefully, if they are current customers, you've earned the right to ask these questions because you've been able to deliver on promises that you've made previously. But first, start with a hypothesis. So that hypothesis might be, I'd like to know what else I could sell to my customers. Okay, great. And the reason is because right now all the other sales are down, and I want to keep my team happy, and I want to be able to survive this period. And there's nothing wrong with saying that, right? And so then out of that, literally the outreach strategy becomes, I would like to speak to you about what you're going through and other ways that I might be able to help you. Do you have 10 minutes? And it needs to be a live conversation to the extent that you can do them. I'm fine with surveys, and I'm fine with NPSs, and I'm good with chatbots, and those things are all great. But if you really want true insights, you need to have live human conversations. Right. You have a really good structure for asking those questions, and it doesn't just need to be a script where you ask 5 questions. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah. How do you feel about jobs to be done as a methodology to be applied in e-commerce? Do you think it can work for e-commerce as well?
I absolutely do. I mean, I think you met Bob Moesta when we were all together in Romania for the Web Summit. I adore him. I love his framework. I've adapted it in certain aspects of what we do as well. I take a little bit of him and a little bit of Alexander Osterwalder and Steve Blank and a little bit of my own stuff. And I have a job, pain, gain, metric, and user framework. So what's the job that someone's hiring you to do? What's the pain associated with the way it's currently being done for them? What kind of gains will they realize if they hire you to do that job? And then how do we measure it? with both immediate metrics and lagging metrics, or what I call leading and lagging metrics, that can demonstrate that they're actually realizing a gain and that everyone agrees on that. And then do it by user type, right? And so when you apply all of that, I absolutely think it's a wonderful basis to format conversation. And you can think about it in this way too. If you were going to write a job description, or if you were going to apply for that job, what would the job description look like? What goes into it? And then that gives you some really good insights. But I think it's a great way to start to form up what else you can be doing for people.
Yeah. In terms of the new normal, let's say, for companies which are, let's say, are coming after a few weeks of tremendous work, and they've got a lot of demand, and they are on the other spectrum, right? So they had to change their operations, their flows, their delivery, supply, and so on. What is your suggestion around preparing for the next months?
Well, I think everyone needs to get down to the basic physical needs, right? Get lean, number one. Minimize all of your fixed expenses and costs. Cut as much of that as you can. And hopefully, to the extent that you need to make investments or have expenses of any sort, they should be as variable as possible. I think that's the first thing you do. Then the second is what and where can I immediately be helping my customers and market so that I can continue to generate revenue right now. And I think I just did a webinar. I've been doing a whole series of webinars on how anybody can and should generate revenue right now. And there's really 6 things. There's 6 tactics that everybody can implement today. 6 things you can do, in my view, to immediately start to try and generate revenue now. And I want them to be actionable for you. So the first thing is to orient yourself around the person and the problem, not the product or the market or the channel. So once again, become very personal with your customer. Create an opportunity to have a conversation around what problems they're facing today that you can help with. The second is to narrow your focus into a small subset of people with that problem you think you can solve, and define the use case in a way through, for example, the job, pain, gain metric user framework, to build a profile, and then go find as many of those people as you can that will keep you going for the next period of time, and then build yourself a market milestone around that says, I'm sitting on 3 months of money, so I need to extend my runway for the next 3 months after that. So my near-term strategy is going to be to try and address this problem for this persona in this way, based on the conversations I'm having with my existing customers about where the opportunities lie. And then I'm going to build a very narrow list of people that will help me get there. And then again, reverse engineer your funnel. In order for me to get X amount of 100 customers, I need to reach out to 5,000 who I think meet this persona. That's fine, right? Put that together and run it as a separate campaign through a separate customer profile. So that's orient yourself around the problem. It's narrow your focus into a small subset. It's build a customer profile that meets those needs. Validate that with those live conversations. Then in the fourth tactic, it's build a value hypothesis around it. I think someone asked a question earlier, how do you approach your customer? You need to have a narrative, 25 words or less. In this time that we live in, I can help you in these ways, right? And keep it simple. And then in the fifth tactic, it's about how do you monetize that? It may be a very non-standard or untraditional or different way than you're quite used to. Maybe you're offering some other entirely different product line. Maybe it's a subscription model as opposed to a product cost of goods based model. It might even be a service based model. Who knows? Maybe it's your time and your labor in helping your customer. in a consultative way, as opposed to just offering them a product. So work on those things. And then the last one is that campaign outreach and execution. Start the campaign with trying to create as many live conversations as you can so that you can validate your hypothesis, and focus on the ones where you have the strongest existing relationships, and work your way up from the bottom of the funnel of your current opportunities, where you already have relationships, where you already have customers, where you already have engagement. Those are the ones that will convert the fastest. And it's in these times, Val, that it's not the people with the most resources that come out of it stronger. It's the people who are most resourceful. And that means you have to be willing to do what it takes to stay on the field long enough to get through this.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. In terms of the, let's say, creating value these days, what is your take on positioning? Because it's obvious what kind of products we are in need right now, and it's kind of obvious with a few research what kind of products will you be able to sell in the future. And it's clear that we are not going at our office, right? I had to put this logo over here in my meditation room. So it's clear that the real estate will go down. It's clear that people will stay more in their homes. Twitter and Google and all these companies are stating that they are not going to ask their employees to come back. So it's clear that the new environment is our home, and everything that relates to the home could be improved. And we are seeing this. But what about positioning? What's your take on positioning, and how can we? What do you suggest to e-commerce entrepreneurs about positioning? Because the same products are being sold right now by a lot of companies, right? So let's not assume that in our audience we have only DNVBs, which are fortunate enough to produce their own private label. What's your suggestion about positioning and adding value to the same freaking product that everyone is selling?
Well, I think number one, you have to, like I said before earlier, how do you stand out? You have to have a worldview that needs to be clear, and it needs to be yours. It doesn't mean other people won't have the same one. In fact, the hope is that many do. And you need to share that worldview that says that because of the times we live in, I think this is the kinds of problems that are being created that I want to try and solve for. And the people who agree with that and emotionally connect with that, they'll be drawn more closer to you. And the people that don't. And you don't need everyone to be your customer, but you do need to have a unique worldview. And you can be selling the same thing as everyone else. But if your story is authentic about why you're doing what you're doing, and people agree with you, then they will connect, and therefore it will resonate. And then the rest after that is up to you to deliver and exceed their expectations around that promise. And that's how you grow. Yeah.
So that means, I don't know, 80 or 90% of the e-commerce companies should have a voice, because they haven't got any voice. The voice so far was buy this product, 10% discount if you buy it right now.
That's right. And this is how you build a brand, right? You need to have something that speaks to how and why someone does business with you, so that when they're carrying your product or using your service, it says something about them to the market as well. Like, the difference between someone who drives a BMW and someone who drives a Volkswagen. It says something about who they are if they drive a BMW, right? There's something to that. If they drive a Volvo, they're about safety. That's what Volvo is about, right? Yeah. That's always been Volvo's thing. And so who drives Volvos, especially in the United States where I am? It's families with young children that are hyper concerned about safety, right? So pick the brand. There's an identity that goes along with it. that says something, that communicates to the world something about the person. And so you have to have that thing that communicates, and where people go, raise their hand and go, yeah, I feel the same way you do. I see the world in a similar way. So therefore I identify with you, and I want to learn more from you, and I want to be associated with you.
Yeah. On this topic, I've seen a great positioning and strategy from a company which is selling luxury products. So at the beginning, it was a drop in their demand, but they've said, okay, we're not going to stay silent, and they've said, you've deserved your right to treat yourself, even though it's crazy outside. So mainly their buyer persona, their ideal customer profile hasn't got any problems in terms of the purchasing power to continue buying their luxury products. And I found it amazing that they've positioned themselves, acknowledging the fact that the environment has changed, so without pretending that nothing is going on, but creating a conversation and a positioning for their product.
Yeah, they've named the enemy, right? And Andy Raskin talks about this when he builds pitch decks and stories and narratives for companies. And I love, if you want to follow somebody who knows how to build a narrative, Andy Raskin is fantastic. I'll put it in the chat. Yep. But Andy builds some of the most successful narratives and pitch decks in Silicon Valley. And I've been a student of his work for a long time. But the first thing you have to do is name the enemy. Something's going on, right? That's creating the pain that you're feeling, or some sort of negative emotion. Because if you're trying to think about how do you attract consumers, your job is to always take a negative emotion and turn it positive, or give them more of a positive emotion that they enjoy. And so how do you articulate that emotion, right? And as you said, this luxury brand said, just because you're stuck at home doesn't mean you can't treat yourself. And there's a certain amount of people who go, yeah, I agree with that, right? And those are the people that they'll attract. You shouldn't have to, just because you're at home, you shouldn't have to suffer this, or you shouldn't have to put up with that.
Yeah.
Right. Tolerate this, accept that, feel this, think about it. Right. There's this pyramid of the elements of value that you can research on Harvard Business Review that talks very much about these 16 elements of value to a consumer. And you can pick literally the ones that you want to use to speak to. I don't have a link to it, Val. I'm sure you can find it, but look up elements of value on Harvard Business Review and share that with the group. But it gives you a basis and a structure for thinking about what are these value points can I most, best address right now. With my product or market. Because again, you got to get away from looking at the product, and you've got to get into the insights of your customer and how they feel right now. And what feelings are they going through right now? This is a great way to think about it. What feelings are your customers experiencing right now that you think you can help? Right? Negative feelings, or what positive ones do they want more of? How can they get that dopamine squirt in their brain from clicking the buy button with you?
Yeah, that makes sense. In our research, we've made all these studies, and we've made a lot of experiments here, and the data shows that we've made we've reviewed thousands of experiments made on the websites, and we realized that the copywriting, so the copy itself, it's responsible for 40% of the total experiments. So take only the total amount of work to change the website, the JavaScript, to add images, to do all this design and all those things, and only 60%, only 40% of all the experiments were simply changing the words, right? So nothing technical about it.
That's right, and I love it. And there are some wonderful tools that you can plug in for that out there as well, right? When Grammarly, I think, is pretty expensive, but there's other tools like Grammarly out there that can help you automate and make suggestions about copy. I think that's certainly part of it. But I always look to the customer to give me the words they use to describe what they're going through, and then use them. Right?
Yeah.
Your customers
chat transcripts and video recordings and so on. It's such an underused technique, because you have the chat transcripts from all the customer support. You also have the chat transcripts from the chat with the prospects, and you could find the keywords there. You can understand how they are verbalizing their pains and their needs, and you could use that to craft your unique value proposition, to craft your advertising.
Absolutely. You're 100% correct. One of my favorite tech companies in Silicon Valley these days is called Gong, gong.io, Gong.io. And they, this is an example. It's not something that's probably useful for e-commerce, but it's useful for sales conversations. It records the conversation, it analyzes all the words, and then it breaks it down in a way that allows you to determine how successful the conversations can be and what you can learn from that at a big data level. And some of the results and some of the data that they're sharing with the world about what works and what doesn't in a sales conversation has been remarkable. And I don't know if that exists for chat the way, I'm sure it does, and I can't cite the tool right now, but if it doesn't, somebody should build that, because that would be an amazing thing. What can go through and analyze all the text and transcripts and then tell you what works and what doesn't, so that you can build those value propositions and messages. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. Sean,
and if you find something, Val, send it to me, okay?
Yeah.
If you find a good tool, I'd love to know about it.
Yeah, of course. So Sean, in terms of growth, the growth mindset, how do you think a company should take on growth? Because we have all these conversations around growth marketing, growth hacking. Marketing is obsolete. You need to be data-driven marketing, and all these buzzwords. In your opinion, how would an ideal team look like for an e-commerce company that is having enough traction to afford to hire some?
Oh wow, that's a good question. If you had the resources, yes, I would have someone who's responsible for creation, someone who's responsible for standardization, and someone who's responsible for optimization, and then someone who's responsible for retention and growth. So you think about the whole customer lifecycle. So creation, what does that mean? I need a really smart growth hacker who's very creative, who's always testing every day. Their job is to run experiments. Do you know how many experiments Amazon runs in a month?
Thousands, maybe, yeah.
3,000.
Yeah.
Right? That's the last number I heard. So you always have somebody running experiments, right? You always have somebody who's looking at, based on the results at the top of the funnel that are coming out of those experiences and the existing markets, creating standardization and designing the customer journey, the funnel, the steps. Then you've got your CRO folks like you, right? Who's optimizing rates based on based on current flow, analyzing that. And then you've got your onboarding, retention, and growth, customer success, who picks up the journey from there and runs it. And then depending on your ratios, is you just need to map out the entire customer life cycle, right? Every stage and step. What are we asking people to do? How should they feel about it? What do they think about it logically? How can we minimize the number of steps? And then who owns that step? And so underneath that, you've got your organizational structure. That is, step 1 to 3 is owned by the growth hackers running experiments, and then step 4 through 6 is owned by et cetera, and work your way all the way through it that way. And then I think you always have to have somebody who's looking at new not just new markets, but new offerings that can turn around and put that back into the hands of your front
for new opportunities.
Correct. And there's a wonderful tool, by the way, again, real quickly, that is called it's called the Soundboard by Edge Theory. And Edge Theory collects the conversations that are going on in the marketplace and then analyzes them and will automate content for you that helps you drive a narrative or a conversation for a particular topic or keyword. It's wonderful in B2B e-commerce. I don't know about the B2C e-commerce applications right now, but I think it's fantastic. It automates content creation.
Yeah, that's excellent. We're also to update you on what we're realizing here, Sean, is that we realize that CRO itself is becoming obsolete in a way, because companies should craft the customer journey and the digital customer journey from the very beginning. So instead of companies and agencies and tools like us going there to fix the user experience and to actually fix something that is broken, what if someone has the agenda from the very beginning to test and optimize it continuously from the company itself?
Well, that's why you need design thinking principles and user experience designers involved in your work. Every great touchless environment has great design thinking elements. And so I agree. I'm leaving this call in 3 minutes, and I'm spending 2 hours facilitating a customer journey mapping session for one of our portfolio companies. That's all about mapping out this 2.5 year cycle. They didn't even know they had a 2.5 year cycle until I sat them down and asked them about it. And now we know they've got, from the first time they touch a customer till they leave this experience is 2 years and 6 months. And so what are you asking everybody to do, and when and how, and who's responsible for making sure that that happens and provides the optimal experience? So we're going to do that. It's a fun thing to do if you haven't done it.
We've done it here, and based on that research, actually, we've built our latest product, which is around the customer lifetime value tracking for e-commerce and customer segmentation. So,
that's fantastic! I'd love to see that at some point.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to have your your harsh feedback on what we built. Yeah,
I'll give you my time and tell you the truth, Val. That's the
That's what I need, exactly. Yeah. So, Sean, I really appreciate you being here with us today. Where can people reach out if they want to get in touch with you? Where they can follow you and your work?
Sure. They can follow me on Twitter at Sean A. Sheppard. They can connect with me on LinkedIn. Of course, they can go to growthx.com or gxacademy.com to learn more about us and what we do and for whom. But always happy to have a conversation with you, Val, and look forward to doing it again soon.
Perfect. Thanks a lot again, Sean, and thanks everyone for watching. Have a great day ahead. See you next time.
Stay strong. Stay resilient. We'll see you soon.